Our coverage on the refugee crisis, and Germany is one of the most generous EU states in terms of taking in refugees. Angela Merkel's government is expecting 800,000 arrivals this year. Now that figure is expected to rise to 1 million. As Rob Reynolds reports, small towns like Zelo are starting to see big changes.
In eastern Germany, Zelo is a town near the Polish border with 5,500 residents. There are also more than 1,000 refugees in the region, and with refugees surging into Germany each day, there will soon be hundreds more placed here. Some residents welcome them. This woman said she herself was a refugee following Germany's defeat in 1945.
I know how it feels when you're on the road with no food, water or a place to stay.
Others say refugees are a burden and get too many government benefits.
There are too many. They are overrunning us.
German society will go under because we're being pushed into a corner.
This area is economically depressed and has been losing population for decades.
In many places, lots of buildings are empty. People are afraid of the refugees because people don't know foreigners here. They've never left this region. They only know their village community.
Getting people to overcome those feelings takes a lot of work, says local administrator Lutz Amsel.
The first thing we do is to explain what kind of position the asylum seekers are in. Some people don't really know anything about that.
This shelter outside of town houses 65 people, refugees from several countries. We visited with Fadi al-Musalmin and two of his friends in the room where he's lived for 9 months.
It's clean, we get medical care and everything, we get our benefits, so we're pretty content.
But the residents are isolated here. Senjar Hussein says he's never spoken with a single German person outside the shelter.
We would like to mix with other human beings in order to get used to these people.
The people here say they are perfectly happy with the way they're being treated, and they've had no conflicts with any Germans. But they're anxious to leave this place and move on to find their own place in German society. Allah Al-Zayad, her husband Mohammed, and 3-year-old daughter fled from Latakia, Syria.
I hope for my daughter a good future. And I want to complete my study here in university. We love Germany people.
Maybe these children, already learning German at school, will help their families integrate into their new land and pave the way for thousands of new arrivals. Rob Reynolds, Al-Jazeera, Zelo, Germany.
Now, some of the more prosperous countries of the Middle East have been criticized for not doing enough for Syrians fleeing the conflict. The UN claims the 6 countries of the Gulf Cooperation Council have barely taken in any refugees since the conflict began. The Gulf states say they are home to hundreds of thousands of Syrians, but do not give them refugee status. Now, Saudi Arabia says it has received some 2.5 million Syrians since the beginning of the conflict, and hundreds of thousands have decided to stay on as residents. Saudi Arabia also claims it has provided $700 million in aid to the Syrian people. It also continues to help refugees stranded in camps in Jordan as well as in Lebanon. Now, Arsalan Iftikhar is an international human rights lawyer and senior editor for the Islamic Monthly magazine. He joins us live now from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, Saudi Arabia is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention, but they say they've taken in Syrians since the start of the conflict, but they haven't given them refugee status. In your opinion, is this a credible claim?
Well, I think it's quite convenient on the part of the Saudis. I think it's actually laughable that, they have not given refugee status, and they know why, because under international law, even if they aren't signatories to the 1951 Refugee Convention, once a person is designated as a refugee, they are granted certain status. And let's not forget that there's an entire part of Saudi Arabia known as Rub al-Khali, which literally means the empty quarter in Arabic. And so they can solve the entire refugee process by repatriating every refugee there and turning the empty quarter into the full quarter in the worst humanitarian crisis since the Bosnian and Rwandan genocide of 1994.
At the same time, it's not all Arab nations, though, that are being criticized. Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey have taken in something like 700,000 refugees. Given that the Middle East is divided along religious, cultural and ethnic lines. Now, if Gulf states were to take in refugees of a different ethnic, religious, cultural backgrounds, wouldn't that not be in the best interest of the refugees and the host population?
No, I mean, Fawzia, if you look at every Arab Muslim nation on the face of the earth, there's diversity in every single one of them. You have Sunnis, you have Shias, you have Christians, you have Jews, you have people of all different backgrounds. I think that this is again, this is a convenient excuse, to label people migrants. And again, I'm not just calling out the Arab Gulf nations, I'm calling out Europe as well. I mean, when European countries call people migrants, again, they know that if they refer to them as refugees, that would trigger protections under both the 1951 Refugee Convention and the European Union laws, which essentially would allow refugees to get asylum status. Migrants essentially means that these are people who are immigrating of their free will and not without any well-founded fear of persecution. And so again, these are refugees, and this is a political game that's being played both by EU countries and by Gulf nations.
Let's talk about the treatment that refugees are currently receiving in Hungary and places like Macedonia as well. Now, Human Rights Watch has labelled Hungary's treatment of the refugees there as being abysmal. But is that fair to blame the Hungarian government for these conditions that the refugees are in, given that Hungary is not a thriving economy, it's not receiving any help from other EU states as well. In fact, it's being overwhelmed by the arrivals.
No, it is absolutely valid. I mean, if you look at the rise of, ultra-nationalist, right-wing, anti-Muslim, immigrant political parties in countries all over Europe, let's not forget that according to the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants, over 2/3 of the world's refugees are Muslims. And again, a lot of these European countries with their rise in right-wing, ultra-nationalist, xenophobic parties, essentially say that we don't want more brown Muslim people on our shores. But again, I think it's important for all of us to remember that there are international conventions in place, and that refugees, no matter where they're from in the world, no matter what religion they practice, should be afforded those rights under international law.
Arsalan, it's great getting your insight. Thank you so much for joining us. Arsalan Iftikhar there, international human rights lawyer.
Thank you.